Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for another Discover Wildlife evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Dan Free. I'm the General Manager here at Wildlife Worldwide and the Travelling Naturalist. And this evening, I have the pleasure to be hosting the wonderful Helen Bryon, who's going to be telling us all about South Africa and the trips that she's been leading out there in the past year and the incredible stuff that she's been seeing. I've been lucky enough to travel to South Africa probably about a dozen times now, and I've even kind of recce'd and researched a few of these trips, so I'm quite familiar with them, and we really are in for a treat tonight. The talk should last around 45 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. Okay, maybe 40 minutes, we'll see. There's a few slides to get through, but it's all very good stuff. So about 45 minutes, and there'll be questions at the end. I will be keeping an eye on the questions throughout the talk. They can be posted in the chat or the Q&A forum. I'll respond to any that are very specific, or I will put them to Helen at the end of her talk. At the end, as always, there will be a poll where you can request any travel plans that are of interest. Again, Helen will just talk us through those options and give us a very quick summary of each trip. But I know that Helen is desperate to get started and super excited, just for a change. So without further ado, shall I pass over to you, Helen?
Lovely, thank you. And when I was going like that, I was kind of saying, I think it's probably going to be in excess of 40 minutes. So sit back and grab a glass of wine and hopefully get a bit, brace yourselves, essentially.
Right, good stuff. I'll pass over to you now.
Lovely, thank you. So yes, good evening everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. As you may or may not know, I love South Africa. We offer 8 small group trips out there on an annual basis, and I am lucky enough to lead a number of them. And we have 3 new inaugural departures that went off for the first time this year. And I'm going to start by jumping straight into one of them, where this photo was taken. My photos are not in the league of Brett, Emma, Sean, etc. I've used most of my own just to prove that any old amateur can get a couple of nice shots. But don't expect professional ones. Right, let's move on. Okay, so the first trip that I'm going to talk to you about this evening is our Kalahari conservation experience in green season. Now, for me to do this trip justice, we need to strip it back to our regular Kalahari conservation experience. Whereas our green season trip operates in either January or February, we offer and have done for the last 5 years our regular Kalahari conservation experience that departs every September. And we had 2 groups that joined me back to back in the Kalahari in September of this year. Now, this trip, we fly direct into Johannesburg. We spend a day-long transfer by road to get to a very remote corner of the Northwest Province, tucked up right underneath the Botswana border, and we then base ourselves on a wonderful reserve for 7 nights. And essentially, this is South Africa's largest Big 5 private reserve at just under 100,000 hectares. To put that into perspective, we have a couple of hundred of kilometers of fence line circa around the reserve. It would take you hours to drive from one end of the reserve to the next. And there's only our lovely, comfortable, tented camp, and then one newly built luxury small camp on site. Up until now, that luxury camp opened in June, and as yet, our vehicles have never bumped into one of theirs. So essentially, we have the Kalahari to ourselves, and that is one of the key selling points of this trip, regardless of whether you come with me in September or whether you join me in the green season. Now, in September, we are at the end of the dry season, an optimum time for wildlife viewing. There are no flowing water sources through this reserve, so we are limited to waterholes and waterholes only. That is a good thing. This would be a typical waterhole scene travelling in the dry season in September, where you have an amalgamation of plains game, almost Etosha-esque in many respects, with your quintessential Kalahari animals: plain zebra, eland, blue wildebeest, southern giraffe, and if you can just see them peeking out on the left-hand side, you've got 3 white rhino. So this would be a very typical scene with all of the action concentrated on those particular waterholes. You may get red hartebeest coming down. You may get springbok coming down to drink. There's a variety of sort of daker. They're not so commonly seen, but steenbok. So you've got plenty of antelope, plenty of plains game, and they will come down to the water somewhat nervously, very skittishly. Although there are no crocodiles and no hippos in this part of the world, there are predators aplenty. So they're very skittish. They'll often come down to the water, gulp that water down, and then they will leap away at any sound that possibly disturbs them. Sometimes you will also find predators almost toying with their prey. Now, wild dogs are unlikely to go for zebra here. There's plenty of other preferred prey species, oryx in particular, that they go for, and red hartebeest. But you do sometimes see them interacting. And of course, in any wildlife sort of experience, that is a real winner. These waterholes are also bustling with bird life. In this case, we have Burchell's sandgrouse. They're one of my favourite creatures. You can just sit by the waterhole, turn the engine off, and they come in their droves. You can hear the flapping of the wings often before you actually see them. And again, it's a somewhat panicked sort of gulping of water, but also what these creatures do, they soak up water with their chest feathers, and then they go back to the nest, feed their chicks, and offer the water that has been stored in their chest feathers. But you'll get all variety of other birds, from South African shell ducks through to blacksmith lapwings, through to your seed eaters like your waxbills, your canaries, your petilias. There's all sorts of action going on when you're down by the river. The waterhole. So, what is actually involved in a conservation experience? The key thing that I would like to get across for both the green season and for our regular September departure is not to be put off thinking that there is matters of manual labour involved. There is not. On this particular trip, there is pretty much next to nothing in terms of manual labour. You need to be able to get on and off a vehicle fairly quickly, to walk through the bush, not particularly long distances, but the bush is littered with holes made by digging animals, aardvarks, porcupine, and more. So getting on and off a vehicle is the priority quickly in terms of sightings, but don't be put off by manual labour. There's very little, if nothing, really, of that element. So what do we do then? Well, what we do predominantly is predator monitoring, and that's quite exciting. So we have a number of predators on the reserve that are followed for research purposes. These 2 cheetahs that we have here are part of a coalition of 4 males, one of whom has a collar, and that collar gives off a GPS signal and also a VHF signal, enabling us to try and get closer to them using telemetry. So the GPS gives us a rough idea of where on the reserve they are. Of course, they can move. We drive to that area, we get our telemetry set out, and we hopefully then make our way to the cheetahs. We have the chance then often just to sit with them, because if they decide to go off and hunt, our intention is to follow them. And we will do that off-road, a lack of other vehicles. No one else is coming into these sightings. We have them to ourselves. And as I mentioned before, that is really one of the key selling points for this trip. So we watch the cheetah rest, preening, interacting with each other. The 4 boys, they can be flat cat. They can be quite, sort of full of frolics and fun. We also get to follow them when they get up and start to hunt. We'd spent an hour in September sitting by a pan, watching these guys in the golden late afternoon sunshine on the other side of this huge calcrete pan. We can't drive on the pan, so we had to sit and wait and hope that as the heat of the day lessened, they would get up and they move. And that's exactly what happened. We then spent a good 40 minutes or so following them through the bush, watching them as they scent marked, as they picked up scent of potential prey, and we followed them onto the outskirts of this pan. And then, would you believe it, you can see the moon in the background. As we lost the light with them, we had a lunar eclipse. It was one of those sensational wildlife moments when all is good in the world, and it was just quite simply fabulous. There were a whole load of springbok on the pan, sensibly right in the middle, so there was no grass cover, enabling them to graze peacefully, knowing that predators wouldn't be able to approach them because there would be no element of surprise with no cover to hide behind. Sensible springbok. So we watched them hunt, not always successfully, but that is one of the key things that we do on this trip. So one of our research animals is cheetah. Here, they're rewriting the field guides. The usual concept is that they are grassland animals only, not true, and also that they only hunt by day, not true. Here, we've often left them in the evening, found them the next day, and they've got huge, full beach ball bellies. So we have the opportunity to follow them until we lose the light, and that is really something quite special. Other predators on the reserve, and this is probably the key predator. We aim to find wild dogs every single day of our stay. This is an ongoing research program. The longer that we can, and the more uninterrupted days that we can follow them, we can have a much better grip on what they're eating, what their prey preferences are, how frequently they're eating. They are very successful, but they're not successful every time. You hear all these figures of 90%. We've watched them time and time again not making kills at that sort of percentage, but they are undoubtedly super efficient, and they are literally one of my favorite animals on the planet. So we follow the wild dogs, and again, like with the cheetah, 2 packs are collared, so we get a GPS signal. We then go to that area, we try and find them with telemetry, but bear in mind that we have often found that these guys will move 24, 25, 26 kilometers in a night. So again, they're not just daytime active, we're also seeing that they're making kills at night, and therefore they are also rewriting the books. This is not the greatest shot in the world. However, it was the result of following the dogs for 1 hour and 40 minutes, uninterrupted, no other vehicles anywhere near us or on the reserve. In fact, we were the only vehicle out on the reserve at this time. We watched them take down a baby steenbok in front of us, and then we watched them take down this oryx. We saw them have standoffs with male oryx, with male wildebeest, with a big herd of young wildebeest. And this is the sort of experience that we hope you will be able to enjoy on this trip. Uninterrupted, no pressure to move off a sighting because there's nobody else there. Not many places in Africa where you can say that. So if we get to see kills, brilliant. Sometimes we find the dogs just after they've made a kill. And sometimes we actually feed them. You did hear that correctly. And you've probably just taken a big sharp intake of breath. But that is another thing that differentiates this conservation experience in September and in the green season from many other safaris. We dig a little deeper. We go behind the scenes. There are too many dogs on this reserve. For a critically endangered animal, they breed like bunny rabbits if they have the room to do so. The irony is that half of the breeding population of wild dogs in Africa are actually on contraceptives because they don't have the space to breed that they used to because of human encroachment. So If you have too many dogs in an area, and let's say a reserve in Malawi or in Mozambique or elsewhere in South Africa wants a pack of dogs, how do you actually dart a pack of 12, 15, even 7 or 8 dogs? How do you actually do that? Especially in an environment where there are so few vehicles and a lot of these animals are not used to vehicles. Well, you feed them intermittently, perhaps once every 2 months, and you do that for 6 or 8 months, and eventually they get used to the vehicle and they will allow then a vet to get close to them and they can be moved. Now, these are not the sorts of conversations that you often have on a regular safari. And on this trip, we dig beneath the surface. We talk about things like this. We talk about poaching. We talk about hunting. We talk about culling. And we generally talk about the management of wild animals. And we do that in situ. So when we've fed a pack of dogs, the alpha male and the alpha female are feeding here. The rest of them were frolicking behind, waiting their turn, and then eventually they could come in and steal some of the scraps. So while we're in situ, we're talking about what these animals are up against, and it is fascinating. We do the same with lion. We're highly likely to run into lion. This was a female that was mating in September. This was the brother of the mating male just looking on. Gosh, just look at him. Look how handsome he is. There are lions that we see that we don't know who they are. They've come into the reserve, we don't know who they are. And again, lions are swapped between different reserves for genetic purposes and so on. So we talk about how that happens. With all of these predators, a lot of kills are made. That brings in scavengers. So we do get great sightings of blackback jackal and of brown hyena in particular. The Kalahari is a great spot from which to look for brown hyena. One of my favorite animals. So different to their spotted cousins. Their spotted cousins are very, very capable hunters. These guys are pure scavengers, and often sundown and sunup is when you'll see them coming down to drink or running across the pan, heading back to their dens. In addition to predator monitoring, what we also do is we do pangolin monitoring. So for the last couple of years, this reserve has been a dedicated pangolin release site for individuals that have been rescued from poachers. A poacher's not going to tell you where a pangolin has come from. And pangolins have very specific dietary needs. If they've grown up eating one particular type of termite, they will only eat that termite, and they will only eat that type of termite if they have dug it up themselves. You can't put a petri dish in front of them and get them to eat when they're in captivity. So if you have rescued pangolins, you have to get them back into the wild as soon as you can, but they then need daily monitoring. So we currently have 4 individuals on the reserve. More have recently arrived. And again, they are fitted. You can see on the left-hand side of this picture, they're fitted with tags. And we, again, if needs be, will go and find them every single day for our 7-night stay. If there is no need to go and see them, we won't, because we're not going to disturb them unnecessarily. But they are a key draw point to this particular trip, the Kalahari Conservation Experience in both September and in green season. So those are really the key selling points of these 2 trips. What you won't find on this reserve is a high number of elephant. We do bump into the odd individual, but if you really want to see elephants, you would need to do some kind of extension. Of course, there's lots of other areas in South Africa that we can add on to this trip, as well as Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Zambia, you name it. Joburg is the main hub for all of Southern Africa. It's also not really a place that you would go to if you wanted to find leopard. They're there, but they're there in very low densities with big territories. I've only seen one here in the 5 years that I've been visiting. Okay, so that's the Kalahari Conservation Experience. So what makes it different in green season? Well, first and foremost, we go from this to this. Look at that scenery change. We go from this to this, from this to this, from dry pans to lush pans. Just for a sense of scale, spot the giraffe that's slap bang in the middle of that pan. This is a time of wildflowers in the green season. This place just comes alive. It's a place of migrant bird species. This is actually a resident, of course, but I just love them, so I'm throwing it in there. Violet-eared waxbill, this is taken from camp. They have a number of bird baths dotted about in front of the communal area, and they are a mecca for widers, for waxbills, for all sorts of wonderful feathered friends that come down to join us. But the green season is also a time for babies, and prey species babies in particular. That, of course, is going to bring the predators, and even seeing them against a lush green background, just the colours just pop. Our pangolin monitoring continues, our wild dog monitoring continues, our cheetah continues. But what you will find is that in the green season, the water holes that I spoke about initially, they are completely dead. The animals won't drink from pumped water if there is an abundance of natural rainwater all over the pans, which is what we have here. So with that, you do get dispersal of game because they don't have to concentrate around the water hole. As a result, in the green season, lions can sometimes be harder to find. This year, we were tripping over them. Big guys, little guys. These guys have just been, they must be about 10 weeks old or just above that, because you can see their bellies are full, and they've just been on a kill. So they must have just been adding meat to their milk diet. And in between, big guys, little guys, and youngsters coming through. So lions can be harder in the green season. But other than that, I hope that I have set the scene for the Kalahari conservation experience and how it differs between the dry season in September and our green season trip, which for the next 2 years will operate every January. Okay, so 2 trips down. Right, our next one in August, I was lucky enough to go back to South Africa to lead another new trip, our Wildlife of Land and Sea. It does what it says on the tin. We've got 2 marine mammals and we've got 2 land mammals on the cover there of the itinerary. So what we do is we start by flying non-stop into Cape Town with British Airways. We hit the ground running from Cape Town. We land and we drive straight to our first point, which is Hermanus, the land-based whale-watching capital of the world, in their opinion. And on the way, halfway between Cape Town and Hermanus, we have Betty's Bay, or Stony Point Penguin Colony. This, you've got Simonstown or Boulders Beach directly in Cape Town. Love it, absolutely love it. But Betty's Bay is a more natural setting. It is on a lovely, lovely bay. You're straight into the thick of it with penguins snoozing, with them sort of nesting, and just literally around your feet on the beach, in the water. You've got a plethora of other wildlife there as well. So we've got all sorts of cormorants. We had lots of waders on the beach. Beautiful flowers with osteospermums everywhere and succulents, the pounding waves coming in all the time, and dassies or rock hyrax. And they often try to steal the limelight. They're ever so cute. You get reptiles as well. So there was all sorts, wonderful bird life, obviously with the penguins, but a wonderful way to start the trip. We just spend an hour and a half or so just walking along the boardwalks, enjoying the penguins, and then we come here. Oh my gosh, we stay in the most beautiful clifftop accommodation, the Marine. It is a stunner of a property with an incredibly warm, genuine welcome. The staff are outstanding, and you literally walk from the hotel out of some double doors onto this lawn, and then you can see that these benches are scattered all the way along, and you're overlooking Walker Bay. And this is where whales, southern right whales in particular, but sometimes humpbacks and Brewer's whales too, come to breed during the South African winter months. So we time our visit in August. They are there from June through to November. So So if you needed to travel at a different time of year or wanted to do it privately, we can certainly help you with that. But this is a gorgeous, gorgeous spot. You literally sit on those benches. You've got sunbirds, you've got sugar birds, you've got grass birds, you know, literally just all around you, tweeting away really quite happily. There's Cape mongoose that will practically run over your feet, and you're on the edge of the cliff, and ideally, this is what you're going to see. One client this year didn't even make it onto the lawn. She sat on her balcony and she saw 4 whales from her balcony that very first afternoon. And the pace of this trip initially is lovely. We spend 4 nights in Hermanus, 3 full days. Mornings are spent on a boat, whale watching, on this boat, in fact. And we are on our whale watch boat out in the bay, aiming to get up close and personal with the southern right whales. And then afterwards, we come back to Hermanus. We go for a leisurely lunch, al fresco if we can. There's some stunning, stunning eateries, and they're all within walking distance, and it's a very safe place to be. So you don't have to concern yourself with security, which obviously South Africa does have a reputation for, but there are areas where you can avoid that. So we go out, again, these are my images. They're not the greatest images you'll ever see of a southern right whale, but the first morning we had a mother and a calf who were incredibly inquisitive, and they came up to the boat at the same time a humpback surfaced. We were like, whoa, oh my gosh, you know, 2 different whales literally on either side of the bow, and that was our first sighting. And the calf just displayed some wonderful behaviour. It would rest its tail repeatedly on mum, and then it would just start to roll. It would show us its belly button, it would show us its eye, and they just kept coming to the boat, drifting off a little bit, coming back to the boat, drifting off a little bit. The next 2 whale watches were totally and utterly different. We went to a different part of the bay, over on the far side of the bay where there's nothing but sand dunes, as you can see here. And we were finding mother and calf pairs rolling in the rollers. We saw babies breaching. We saw tail slapping, but also just in terms of the atmosphere, our second morning was overcast and quite ethereal, and we had babies breaching. One started on our bow, on our port side, the next one on our starboard. It was fabulous. So it's really lovely because you spend the mornings out and about on the water. Afternoons are yours to do with as you wish. So you can go shopping, you can sit on your balcony, you can sit in your bedroom. All clients have a sea view from their room, and you can just watch whales. One afternoon, however, we do something a little bit special. It's like somebody knows that I like whales and big cats and wine. I mean, who'd have thought it? So on one afternoon, we went to Creation Wines in Hermanus, up the Heaven and Earth Valley, to a lovely setting, and we had a tasting menu. We got there, I think, at about 12:30, and if I remember right, we left at 4:30. We literally got back to the hotel about half an hour before I'd made dinner reservations, so we promptly pushed those on because we'd had a huge amount to eat. Brilliantly thought out, absolutely superb, and Creation has actually won the best wine farm in Africa. So that's all included on our trip, and it's really quite smashing. So as our time in Hermanus came to an end, we all thoroughly agreed with this particular statement, and we flew from Cape Town into Hoedspruit. And the minute we arrived back in Hoedspruit for me, because that's where I used to live and work when I was a field guide out there, and I knew I was home, and I knew it was winter because the impala lilies on the runway, or just off the runway, were flowering. There were vervet monkeys everywhere. The impala lilies were out, and I was like, big sigh, back in my home environment. We got to the lodge. We'd seen elephants on the way, we'd seen zebra on the way. As we turned off the main road from the airport into Clisiri, which is the private game reserve that we stay at, we had more antelope and more plains game than you could shake a stick at. We got to the lodge, we were serenaded throughout our 4 nights here by these brown-hooded parrots, who were ridiculously obliging in terms of photographs. And then we hit our first afternoon game drive. We might be in the bush, it might be quite dry at this time of year, but there were flashes of colour. This is a Birchill starling, one of the most beautiful birds, differentiated from common by those long, or from glossy by those long tail feathers, and also their black cheeks, but they're just gorgeous, gorgeous creatures. And we got off to a fantastic start. Our very first evening game drive, wildcat. Tick, lovely, thank you. Boom. So that was a good one. I would then go on to say, oh, a bit overzealous there. Hang on, I'm going the wrong way here. I would then go on to say that really, for me, and I think we discussed it with the clients as well, all of whom were, very seasoned safari goers, hyenas pretty much stole the show for our 4 nights in Clisserie. It's a big 5 reserve, part of the Greater Kruger area. This individual, she was a female. You can't tell that. They also have a pseudo penis, but we could tell she was because she was lactating. So she came down into our waterhole right opposite the lodge, had a little dunk, and then took herself off into the bush. But really, there was just behaviour that we hadn't seen before, and pretty much all of it came down to spotted hyenas getting in the way. Now, I love spotties. I know a lot of people are not big hyena fans. Boo-boo to Disney and everybody else that sort of perpetuated that idea. They're fabulous and they're fascinating. And we watched this poor hyena here being absolutely harassed by these 2 black-backed jackals. It was essentially sitting down on its backside to protect it and kind of almost doing wheelies, doing spins. And what we noticed afterwards is that once the hyena had been chased off well and truly, the female of the jackal also had teeth. So they were clearly just moving this threat off their territory to protect their pups. So this was really kind of hyena interaction number 1. Number 2 came on our second afternoon game drive when we had a humdinger of a leopard sighting. As soon as we left the lodge, we heard on the radio that there were 2 leopards on a sighting, and we weren't far away. So we made our way there, but we could also hear that quite a few other vehicles on the reserve were making, their way too. So we knew that it was likely to be busy, but as with all private reserves, there is a limit on how many vehicles can be in the sighting at any one time, and the drivers were very, very courteous towards each other, making sure that all clients had a chance to see. Now, we heard there were 2 leopards, so we were like, oh, either they're mating or it's a mother and a cub. It was neither. We got there and we basically parked up next to 2 large trees. In one on our right was this little fella. This was a young male, and on the tree on our left was a big male, and he had a kill. There was a lot of hissing and snarling and a lot of fisticuffs vocally going on between the 2 males. And it transpired that actually the guides knew these 2, and it transpired that this one was likely the cub of the big male. We ascertained that this young male had made the kill, it was a warthog, but that Dad had come along and nicked it and basically taken it up a tree, and then he was trying to intimidate his offspring and was basically pushing his weight around. So the youngster came down and went and sat at the bottom of the tree, lay down, and essentially stayed there for the rest of the afternoon. We saw the leopards. We let other people come into the sighting. We took ourselves off, and then we decided that, we would come back to the sighting. And that was a great move because we ended up having these 2 leopards to ourselves for an hour. And what happened was the male did a bit of stretching, bit of downward dog, nice stretching, and then he did a leap up above him to where he was in the tree, and he started to eat. And we spent an hour as the sun was setting, so the light is not brilliant on these photos, and he was quite high up above us, but he proceeded to eat. We could hear the sinew, we could see the muscles and the tendons and the flesh being pulled. And we essentially sat directly underneath him and we watched him feast for nigh on an hour while his offspring basically lay down at the other tree very close by. The hyenas came once it got dark. So although there was no interaction between the hyenas and the leopards in this case, we watched Dad basically get stuck in, but we were able to see hyenas gathering at the base of the trunk. We also saw hyenas with wild dogs. I mean, crikey, we pulled into a wild dog sighting. They were resting. There were only a few adults. They were resting in the heat of the afternoon sun. And there were a number of puppies, as you can see here, and they were all just resting. And then a head popped up directly in front of our vehicle, and there was one hyena. Then another one popped up. There was another. And this was literally within a metre or two of a whole load of wild dog pups. And I was just, what on earth is going on here? But of course, the hyenas were biding their time, waiting for those dogs to move, to go off and hunt. And then, of course, they would get the spoils after the wild dogs had taken their fill. But it was amazing. And we saw the puppies just playing with, sort of grass bales here. We also saw just interaction between the hyenas themselves. There was a hell of a furore at 2 o'clock one morning. I slept through it all. But lions had made a kill right outside camp, and the hyenas were there en masse when we got there at 6 o'clock the next morning. They had taken off an awful lot of the kill. There was very little of it left, but it gave us the chance to just sit and watch the hyenas interact. And this series of images was essentially a youngster trying to go and feed off mum, and mum was having absolutely none of it. There was then a standoff between the remaining hyenas and 2 young male and 2 young female lions that you can see here. You can see the blood around her chops. And then they got up eventually as the sun came up. They walked off. They had a bit of a stretch. We thought that they might hunt again, but then they gave up, so we left them to it. This was our last morning. We drove a little bit further on and we came across another male lion, and then we came across a pair of mating male lions. So mating lions. So we essentially just had a humdinger of a time. Plus we had an afternoon with 5 white rhino, a male who was trying to get some female action. Both females had calves, so they were having none of it. We had a calf that absolutely stole the show by squealing and squealing and squealing until mum eventually gave in, despite it being quite a big calf at this point, and we watched it feed. It was very, very special. And between drives, we were treated to elephant sighting after elephant sighting after elephant sighting. We could sit in the pool and just watch the elephants at eye level on the other side of the fence. It was brilliant. So land and sea, big tick, thumbs up. All right, that's 3 trips down. We're getting there, honest, but we're coming up to 40 minutes. Okay, right, so South Africa's rare mammals and birds. This is a trip that Dan recce'd last year, and we went out for the first time this year. And essentially, this does what it says on the tin, rare mammals and birds. A lot of the rarities are nocturnals. So on this trip, you need to be prepared to do a lot of night drives. We travel in September, so it can be quite cool at night. But essentially, we're going really off the beaten track here. We fly you into Bloemfontein initially. We then drive you down to the Khoisan Karoo Reserve. So on this map, you can see where Bloemfontein is. There's no point me pointing at it. Let me use my mouse. There's Bloemfontein. And then we essentially drive for a few hours coming down into an area that is traditionally working ranches. So a lot of these working ranches are now offering home style accommodation, very homely, nice, good home cooked food, and they are gradually embracing ecotourism. But being working ranches, the lack of predators means that the opportunities for rare mammal sightings are very, very good. Afterwards, we go on up to Madikwe for a big 5-6. So just to talk you through the trip, so we come down into Bloemfontein, we head to the Khoisan, where this would be your typical sort of scene. This is the home of blue cranes, one of the most gorgeous birds on the planet, I think, and actually South Africa's national bird. They were seen on the transfer down to the Khoisan Karoo. And on the very first night drive, the wonderful bush kangaroo, or a spring hare, tigger, as I call them. They often come out about an hour after sundown, and they boing, 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 boing all through the bush, and they never fail to make me smile. First night, we also got bat-eared fox. We also got Cape porcupine. People are often surprised at the size of a porcupine. They are Africa's largest rodent. They're huge, and they're certainly not to be messed with. The following day, we got some of the rarer birds. So we've got a northern black Quran here that sounds like a chicken being strangled when they take off and then sort of squawk their way through the air, but they're wonderful creatures. We got blue Quran as well, yellow mongoose, and in an area where clients had gone to see rock paintings, we got eastern rock sengi, or elephant shrew, to you and me. That evening, not one, but aardvark aplenty. In addition, sorry, let me try that again. That was actually an aardwolf. So they got aardwolf followed by aardvark, not just one, but two. And then other sightings that they were fortunate enough to get, striped polecat. These are fabulous. I've seen plenty of them. Do I have a single photo of them? No, I do not. There's potential for caracal. There's potential for African wildcat and black-footed cat. We also go on to Marrick Game Reserve, and we go to Makala National Park. So it's a two-centre trip, essentially, initially looking for the rare mammals, and then we go on to Madikwe, and there is your chance for your big five. So I'm just going to read out a message that we got from this tour leader when we have a sort of wildlife update WhatsApp group. And his comments towards the end of the trip: we've enjoyed good to great visuals of aardvark, aardwolf, 4 aardvark in fact, and double figures of aardwolf, wild dogs, bat-eared fox, lions with cubs on kills, cheetah on a kill, rowan, sable, white rhinos, buffalo, eastern rock sengi, spotted eagle owls, western barn owls, white-backed vultures, Caspian plovers, both flamingos, yellow-throated stag grouse, Birchall's stag grouse, Birchall's courser, redneck falcon, etc. They also had brown hyena, meerkats, Cape fox, and mountain reedbok. So there we are, South Africa's rare mammals and birds. It went well. Now, back to a trip that I lead, South Africa's rare mammals in style. This goes to Swalu in the Northern Cape. And as the travel plan cover implies, and as the name suggests, our feature here is looking for rare mammals, but doing it in style. That means we fly by private jet from Joburg straight to the reserve. We have a private lodge that we take out in its entirety. We have a private chef. We have private housekeeping. We have private 2 game drive vehicles with private guides and private trackers. This is a phenomenal trip. Swalu was initially set up as a haven for black rhino and for desert black rhino. They are, of course, one of the rare mammals that we look for. We were successful this year when we travelled out there at the end of May. We found wild pangolin, which was super, super exciting. They do have a pangolin project on this reserve. So there are 1 or 2 tagged individuals, but through the sheer skill of one of our trackers, we crossed a sand dune. He saw tracks for fresh pangolin tracks, and he followed them. It took them in excess of an hour, but they found it. And this was our pangolin doing what they do best, completely freezing, going flat and thinking, I can't see you, so you can't see me. So that was super exciting. We also look for aardvark, and most of the clients saw aardvark on this year's trip. It was in the dark, but aardvark is aardvark. It's always very exciting. We look for aardwolf. We look for brown hyena, particularly good for brown hyena, and we are in the most beautiful surrounds. So Swalu is the green Kalahari. It's in the Kalahari Basin. In these mountains that we have here, you will find kudu, you will find Hartmann's mountain zebra, you will find baboons, klipspringer. On its dunes, you will find cheetah. Yes, they do have some collared animals here, wild dogs as well. It doesn't detract from the experience in any way, shape or form, but there are also non-tagged individuals. So we find cheetah in the dunes. The plains are just dotted with eland, with rowan, as you can see here, with sable, with steenbok. Incredibly difficult to photograph because they're so damn quick. But our trip this year was bookended by lions. Love that. They are my favourite animal. So literally we'd landed 5 minutes from landing. We saw these two, plus a couple of youngsters a bit further away. And then they came back to see us off on our very last day, 7 days later. So that was very, very special indeed. The scenery is superlative. We also had fantastic sightings this year. Gosh, the wild dogs got our hearts racing. We had a number of sightings with them, and we saw them on the hunt. We saw them backing hemsbok or oryx into thick bush like this. The oryx won, so it was, the dogs carried on, but we saw them do this 2 or 3 times, and every time your heart rate just goes through the roof, and you just think, crikey, these oryx have got nerves of steel. But if they've got that backside protected, it would be a very unwise dog to take on those saber-like horns. We spent time with black and with white rhino. This is a white, multitudes of them, in fact, quite large crashes, which was very, very special. And one of the things that always people love about Swalu are the meerkat. The colonies that they have there, they actually have a job description for somebody to apply to be a meerkat habituator. What a wonderful job that would be. And the encounters that you can have with these creatures, they don't sit on you like they do in Botswana. They don't climb on you. That is not encouraged at all. But we are able to follow them through the bush. This was a photograph I took one morning, and it was just, they're just lovely, lovely encounters. So Swalu, rare mammals, in style, super lovely, one of my absolute faves. We're almost there, so just a quick plug for some of our other lesser known group trips. Spring flowers from the Cape to the Kalahari. There's a bit of a theme here. We like the Kalahari. So spring flowers from the Cape. You start, as the name suggests, in Cape Town. This goes out in August, September time, when suddenly the West Coast National Park and the Namaqualand just explodes into colours, all the colours of the rainbow. I haven't showed this slide for a long time, but this is a South African sort of tourist board image. I love it. My favourite antelope, the oryx, and just look at that as a setting. So spring flowers at the Western Cape, going up through Namaqualand, and then ending at Algrobbies Falls, which is up near Uppington, and then going into the Trans-Kalahari Frontier Park. What a winner of a trip. That is an absolute stonker. Another stonker. I mean, I don't need to say anything. We can just look at the images here. Zemanga. We're coming across to the far eastern side of the country now. This is to KwaZulu-Natal. And this is, in many respects, a purpose-built lodge for photographers on a reserve that really caters to photographic safaris. This is a trip led by Sean Weekly, and this is one of his images. And you go out on vehicle safaris morning and evening, but there are night hides. He's got caracals that have come down, servals that have come down, zebra, lion, elephant like here, but just that night sky photography with the wildlife from a purpose-built hide, very comfortable hide. It's just, if you want to take images like that, you have to go on a trip with Sean, and he will just help you get the best out of your camera in the most special environs. Right, so we are almost there, I promise you. South Africa, rare mammals of the Eastern Cape. So we're sitting in the eastern part of the country, well, central, south coast really, and we fly you in this case into Port Elizabeth. And then just an hour or an hour and a half away from Port Elizabeth is a wonderful private game reserve called Kariga. And Kariga has mountains, it's lush, It's green, it's got a river running through it, so there are boat safaris with kingfishers and storks and Goliath herons and all sorts. My colleague Emma Healy is actually there at the moment, and she has just had the most wonderful 2 back-to-back trips there. The rare mammals that we are particularly looking for here are caracal and also aardvark. But in addition, you've got wonderful opportunities for elephant, for lion, and for a plethora of, nyala, which is an antelope that's generally confined to the eastern extremities of South Africa and Southern Africa. But another lovely, lovely trip. So you'll be pleased to know I'm pretty much done. Just to précis what I've just galloped through there in the last sort of 50 minutes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Right, so we started with our Kalahari conservation experience in green season. We had to go and strip it back to what the actual Kalahari conservation experience is to start with, the trip that we operate every September. We then talked about South Africa, wildlife of land and sea. That's our combination, starting in Cape Town, going to Betty's Bay for the African penguins, and then continuing to Hermanus for 4 nights of whales and wine, followed by 4 nights in the Greater Kruger area at Clisiri for Big 5, which is rather fabulous. We then briefly covered South Africa's rare mammals and birds, so slap bang in the centre of the country from Bloemfontein, visiting Khoisan Karoo, visiting Makala National Park, visiting Marek Game Reserve, so looking for nocturnal species predominantly on what were working ranches that are opening themselves up to ecotourism. Potential for caracal, potential for wildcat, as I mentioned, and then ending with a Big 5 bonanza in wonderful Madikwe Game Reserve, which is on the Botswana border. Next up was South Africa's rare mammals in style. So that's staying at Swalu in the Northern Cape, probably my favourite place on the planet. Beautiful red dunes, stunning mountains. There's no elephant there. It's a Big 4 reserve, but it's actually the largest private reserve in South Africa. And this is where we concentrate on your aardvark, your aardwolf, your pangolin, your brown hyena, your black rhino. But there are cheetah, dogs as well. So that's rather special. Finally, we just had a very quick mention of 3 of our other group trips. Spring flowers from the Cape through to the Kalahari. So if you're looking for a botanical fix and then scenery and ending up in the Kalahari itself, that's the one for you. Photographers, make a beeline for Zamanga, particularly for night sky photography and wonderful wildlife opportunities. And then rare mammals of the Eastern Cape, where we hope that we will find you caracal and aardvark amongst elephants, lions, and a whole heap of other wonderful African wildlife. So, thanks to the people that have contributed some of the images, Gary, Rob, Michael, Sean and Danny. The rest of them that was probably not quite so good were mine, but hopefully that in a nutshell covers the group trips. Just a quick plug as well, when I'm not leading trips, I'm updating some of our tailor-made itineraries, and I've actually updated most of South Africa's this year, so there are some fantastic self-drive options if that takes your fancy as well. There we are, South Africa. Right, so Dan has launched a poll. So
you can indeed.
Yes, you can request any of those travel plans. And then Dan, have we got any questions?
We haven't, but I need to just say what an absolute star you are, H. The enthusiasm, the passion that you have, I mean, for all your destinations, but particularly South Africa, it is outstanding. And it's wonderful just to sit back and just hear you talk about it and recount tales of what you've seen and everything. And you kind of just bring it all to life. So a massive thank you from me, and I'm sure everybody else. We haven't remarkably got any questions. It's a bit of a first, I think. I think you're obviously so comprehensive in in the details of the trips and everything. Lots of nice comments coming in, lots of thank yous, lots of people that have been on the trips with you, also commenting on how good they were and what a pleasure it is to kind of revisit those. So yes, look, some lovely feedback here, H. But no questions. I guess you've done your job too well.
I didn't leave
And maybe,
time for them, that's why.
and maybe people want their dinner or a glass of wine or something. But
I think
I
so.
think shall we move to the next slide?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Sorry, you always have to prompt me on that. Honestly, useless. Right, hang on. It's
No,
there we are. Oh no, next one. There we are.
we will be in touch tomorrow if you've requested any of the travel plans through the poll. Um, I mean, it is a stunning destination, as we've all seen, and you've not even touched on the fact that you've got Cape Town, you've got the
Yeah,
winelands and stuff as well. It does offer so much. So yeah, I think
beaches,
it's
circles, the Drakensberg. Oh, there's so it's just a fantastic place. It really is, and it also for the majority of the country, it's malaria free, and that's also there's no jet lag. It's malaria free. There's masses of non-stop flights. It's easy, and the rand
yeah.
is brilliant against the pound. So eating out is still very competitive, and there's just not a lot not to love really.
Not to like. No, you're
Brilliant.
absolutely right. And with all the group trips, we can add on stuff pre, post. So if you like the
Yeah.
look of one trip and bits of the other, then just speak to us and we can make it happen. We've got some fantastic consultants in the team who can pull that all together for you. But I think everybody is probably ready to sign off. So we will wish them all our thanks and look forward to seeing them on the 19th of November. So a little bit of a break now for a talk on Namibia, which is going to be by Emma Healy. So we can look forward to that. But yes, thank you all for joining us, guys. Thank you so much, HB, for another wonderful talk. You are exceptional, and we are very lucky to have you. On that note, have a good
You're
evening,
all
guys.
right too.
Right, see you
Managing
later.